showing up on the image.
Friends, here at the cemetery and also through the live stream, I'd like to ask the friends here if you would place your phones into silent mode or turn them off completely. We are going to begin the services for Mr. Samuel Rosen. Services will be conducted by Rabbi Shlomo Tenenbaum.
We'll start out with just the bracha that a lot of times we end up forgetting to say. But when you're at the cemeteries for the first time in 30 days, we say Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher yatzar eschem b'din v'zon v'chilkel eschem b'din v'hemis eschem b'din v'yodea mispar kulchem b'din v'osid la'achiyoschem u'lakaim eschem b'din Baruch Atah Adonai mechayei ha'mesim. Say that. Blessed is Hashem, King of the universe, who gives us life with a purpose, nourishes and sustains us, our life, with a purpose, and knows how long we're supposed to be here, what our job is, and then eventually Hashem takes us back, but He will resuscitate us. We believe that the body is temporary, but the soul is eternal, and one day God will restore the body that we're saying goodbye to with the soul that's going to its proper reward. And we thank God for bringing alive, the resuscitating the body with the soul. Whenever I say this, Yodea Mispar Kulchem Badin, with survivors in particular, I've always been kind of astonished how survivors frequently live very long lives. You would think after what they went through, they'd be lucky to make it to a 40th birthday. And like Mr. Rosen, Zichrono Livracha, he made it to, the clock kept ticking. He was doing pretty well till close to the end. And, those years that got stolen away from them, it seems like they get repaid somewhere later in life. And you often find the survivors living long lives. Mizmor leDavid Adonai roi lo achsar binos deshi arbitzeni al memenuchos yina aleini nafshi yeshoivev yancheni b'maglei tzedek l'man shemo gam ki elech v'geit salmovis lo ira raki atoi modi shiftu mishantecha hema yanachamuni taroch lefanei shulchan neged zorai dishanta b'shem en roshi kosi rivaya ach toiv v'chesed yurdafuni kol yimei chayai v'shavti v'veis Adonai la'orach yomim. The Psalm of David, God is my shepherd, I shall not lack. In lush past meadows he lies me down, beside tranquil waters he leads me. He restores my soul. He leads me on the paths of justice for his name's sake. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, because God is with me. The rod and your staff comfort me. You prepare a table before me in full view of my tormentors. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord for the length of days. And this also, that line about you prepared a table before me in full view of my tormentors, has special resonance with every survivor. Okay, I'm going to call on Mark to say a few words, and a number of people want to share some thoughts.
So I'm going to take my mask off, but please don't consider it a political statement. I'm not emulating any public figures. That was supposed to be funny. I have some prepared remarks, but I want to say a few things spontaneously. I think just about every person here had some connection to my father in some fashion and had some really special memory. And I wish we had a situation in life where there was a normal Shiva and you could all come and share those stories with us. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to work that way at this time. But I if I could harvest all the love in your hearts for my father, I would have enough love for the rest of my life, and lots left over. Lots left over. Now, I was told by my rabbi that during Chol Moed Sukkot, we don't do a hesped, we do words of praise. And the difference between a hesped and words of praise is a hesped, you're trying to make people cry, and words of praise, you're not. So if you cry, it's not my fault. In the Torah, when one of our patriarchs dies, death is described as joining one's ancestors. Our father has now joined his ancestors. He joins his father Mordechai, after whom I am named, a Ger Chassid, who studied Pirkei Avot with young Shmuel, as Sam was known in Poland, on Shabbos afternoons. He joins his mother Chana, who died when he was still a boy, even before his bar mitzvah. Her sisters, Frida and Bronya, later brought our father to the United States in 1948, after his unthinkable ordeals in Europe at 2 slave labor camps and 2 concentration camps. He not only joins his ancestors, but he joins his immediate family. He joins his brother Isaac, who emigrated illegally to Palestine before the war, was the founder of Kibbutz Nitzanim on the Mediterranean, and who was captured by the Egyptians during the Israel War of Independence in 1948. He joins his brother Morris, originally Moshe, whose son Michael is here with us today, a Holocaust survivor like my father who came to America with him and lived close by. He joins his sisters Rachel and Sarah. One of my nieces is named after Sarah. And they both perished in the Holocaust along with our grandfather Mordechai. He also joins his Landsleit, the boys he grew up with and played sports with in Stasio, Poland. And he joins the friends he made in America who are no longer with us, almost all of them Eastern European. My father had 2 lives. He had his life in Europe and he had his life in America. We only saw the American version of Sam. He rarely talked about what happened in Europe. But he brought with him from Europe a quality that is perhaps even greater than fame or achievement or wealth or honor. Everyone liked my father. A lot. One year at the independent living facility, Park Plaza, where he had an apartment, when they had a senior prom, and I mean a senior prom, he was voted prom king. No one had anything bad to say about him. He was truly beloved. It's an interesting experience to have a father that everyone likes. When people would learn that I was Sam's son, they would light up, and I would bask in his glow. I was Sam's son. I probably didn't deserve the goodwill so much when I was younger and immature, but it taught me that having a good name is more important than anything else. Sam had a good name. And our tradition says that when people love someone very much, it means that God loves them very much. Here are some questions I would like you to ponder when you think about Sam in the coming days and weeks. How did someone who went through so much horror become such a kind mensch, beloved by all? What made him so generous? What made him so devoted to our mother Etta and all 3 of us? What inspired him to take a second chance at marriage at the age of 78 to Miriam, once again finding love and companionship? What qualities did he possess that made his wonderful, wonderful caregivers, Tracy and Colleen and Elijah, who are here today, so incredibly devoted to his health, well-being, and welfare? This was not a job for them. They weren't doing this as a job. They loved him like a father or a grandfather or beyond comprehension. What inner resources enabled him to move past his war experiences and become someone who enjoyed life and was grateful for every day he lived in Chicago and America? To be completely honest in describing our father, I would have to acknowledge that the American Sam, who loved sports, still had plenty of the European Sam in him. You could certainly tell every time he said Gewalt or Weismir. When a Cubs player struck out during a key at bat, he would say oi instead of swearing, like an American would. You could take Sam out of Poland, but you could never take Poland out of Sam. Sam didn't think or act like a Holocaust survivor. Some years ago, after his second wife Miriam died, he joined me and my wife Sarita for Passover in Boston. Our next-door neighbor was a prominent public figure, a Holocaust survivor, also from Poland, who was largely responsible for the magnificent New England Holocaust Memorial in downtown Boston. I was eager for the two of them to finally meet. They spent hours talking in Yiddish. Afterwards, I asked him what it was like. Ach, he said, he's still living in the Holocaust. My father didn't live in the Holocaust. He chose a way to live that was decent and honorable and loving and generous. All the things that the Nazis were not. Perhaps this is his greatest lesson to us all. May his memory and his example be a blessing.
So that was so amazing, Mark. Thank you. That was so amazing, Mark. Thank you. I like to do spontaneous talks, so I didn't do anything formal. But what can one say at this time? My dad, as you all know, is the sweetest, kindest man, and he was the most generous man. And he taught me generosity at a very young age. I remember, we would box up our childhood clothes and send them off to orphans and other places. And my favorite Stingray bike, when I was 13, was given to some kid in the neighborhoods, where Dad worked at the store. So he was always giving. He taught me tzedakah at a very early age, and I continued that tradition of giving. And I was very fortunate to learn that from my father. I was also very fortunate to go to work with him very often. I remember at age 4, he would take me to a grocery store on Leader's Store, which was, what was it? 18th Street, and where his brother also worked, selling clothes, and he had a little grocery store downstairs. And I would run through the aisles, and I was reflecting that, my dad also grew up in a grocery store that his parents ran, and it was kind of like we were continuing that tradition. And even at age 10, I was stocking the shelves, and when Alan had his accident, I worked full time with him. And it was really special to work with my dad because, today we live in a world of kind of absent fathers. People go to work and they don't get to bond with their fathers. And even at age 4, I was bonding with my father at work, and that was just very special to have that opportunity and to continue even up, at age 25, I was working with him full time at some point. And, he, like all fathers, they have to be a little critical and a little hard, and you have to learn that that's how they make you tough. And so being a son is sometimes a little bit difficult in that way. But he was always so wonderful, and he taught me so many things just by being. It's very funny that all three of the sons turned out to be kind of, major intellectual academic type people, but my dad had the simplest heart and just lived in the heart, and that was actually it was very special to be around that, because sometimes the mind can't intellectualize about things, and Dad was just very simple, and he also taught us to kind of live in our hearts, and to care and to share, and it was very special. These last years have just been difficult, obviously, as he's been incoherent at times with the senility and things like that. But I was very fortunate. A week ago, last Monday, I called him to see how he was, and he was actually coherent, and we had a nice conversation. And little did I know that was the last conversation I would have with him. But when I know he's always there, and he lives on in our hearts and in our generation, and in the grandchildren, and I'm very blessed to have had such a wonderful father. Thank you.
As Mark mentioned, not to do Hespedium on Chol Hamoed, and I just want to say some words in praise of God and His help to my father over the years. Like a well-written novel of 98 years and many chapters. In the first chapter, you find hints of what will happen farther on. When my father was just a small boy, maybe 5 years old, he left the town where he lived on his own and walked into the forest. Everyone was very, very concerned, and certainly in anti-Semitic Poland, there was a lot to worry about. Well, a bit later, he was brought home by one of the Polish customers of the grocery store, safe and sound. The angel had watched over him and would continue to watch over him. At age 22, he was already in forced labor in one of the worst Nazi camps one could imagine, where workers barely lasted a few weeks from the terrible conditions that they were exposed to. My father somehow found a job that was very dangerous but not difficult, and he was able to get food from the Poles that worked with him and share that with the people around him. And so, in the most difficult of circumstances, God or the angel had provided for him and watched over him, and he was able to move on. As Mark had mentioned, two more angels, his aunts, in 1948 brought Dad and his brother Moshe to Chicago to build a new life, to make a new start. There he met Etta Warbioff, who an immigrant from unstable. He met Eddie Warbioff, a Polish immigrant, and they formed a tight and loving relationship that lasted for 46 years. It was a home steeped in values of what was right and wrong, values about Judaism. They worked very, very hard together, and perhaps their only moment of not working so hard were their Sundays in the summer at Montrose Beach with all their Landslots, where they were able to relax a little and feel a bit of calm. Of course, we know that there was another angel that came into his life 10 years ago, Tracy, who became like a daughter to Dad, and really was dedicated and devoted to him. And all of us are enormously grateful that we had that me and my siblings and my children, that they had a grandfather, thanks to Tracy's tender care of my father, and we're indeed enormously grateful to Tracy. And Dad was very, very proud that his family was in Israel, but at this point, I feel personal guilt that I failed to be there at his side to help him enough. Certainly that, as if I can just go away and say, well, someone else will take care of it. And therefore, I have to give my thanks to all those who were dedicated and devoted to my father and did what I should have been doing. First of all, Mark, who saw to every little detail of my father's needs tirelessly for years and years, and did an amazing job, learned many things, became better and better at what he did, and made sure that Dad was taken care of. To his caregivers, Tracy already mentioned, Colleen, Elijah, and many others who looked after him. To Mark's wife, Sarita, and my brother Barry and his wife, Bonnie, who also looked in on my father, worried about him, and did what they could to be a part of things. To Narit, Richard, and Mike Nussbaum, who always made sure to visit my father and help him to feel connected to the community in what became more and more isolated life at Park Plaza for him. And to the Dissons and Tenenbaums, who were amazing families for him as neighbors before he made it to Park Plaza, who always cared for him deeply, and to so many other people who showed my father enormous kindness and did what really was my responsibility and my job. Dad is going now to the Olam Hamet, the world of truth, and he brings with him, enormous amounts of small tzedakah gifts, uncountable, that he gave over the years, and food that he gave to people of need, rides that he gave to people, other small acts of kindness, each of them in his bag that he carries to the world Olam Hamet, to the world of truth, and are his protector. And of course, we know as another protector all the suffering that cleansed him of all his sins that he experienced when he was so young. What could anyone above say against Dad after what he has gone through? Whatever. I feel terrible that I'm not there with my brothers, with all of you, with all of Dad's friends at this moment, but I'm grateful that I'm able to be there in this way, and all of us here, my whole family here, all of my family's here with me, whether in our hearts or there with you. Thank you.
So I think Dr. Bornstein wanted to share a few words, and
so as you know, unfortunately cannot say Hesped at this time, and you can't bring someone to tears, but we can smile, and we can celebrate the life that was Mr. Rosen. And you think about the world that he grew up in. He was born in the early 1920s in Poland. Even then, it was a bad place to be a Jew. And he went through the Depression. He went through the concentration camps. He went through the labor camps. Comes to America, builds a beautiful family, helps build a community. And there's not an ounce of bitterness in this man. And as Mark and Barry mentioned, when you say Mr. Rosen's name, it brings a smile to people's face. And it's all, I was privileged when I was a graduate student. The Rosens would feel a pack of graduate students who lived in Chicago and on Shabbos, and at that time at Allen, the Rosens were my shadchan. We're internally, my Roch and I are internally grateful, but again, this is a life that was just filled with joy, a life filled with chesed, and after so many years of turmoil, and he comes to America and he builds a beautiful family, and not an ounce of bitterness in this man. It's just a chain that he had. And I wish we can emulate that, especially in these crazy, troubled times. You look at someone like Mr. Rosen, and he's a lesson to all of us. Again, unfortunately can't mark here, but thank you for allowing me to speak a few minutes.
Richard Resnick, close friend to the family. I think Leonard. Let's hear a second ago. Oh, were you going to share some words? Oh, okay. Okay. And I believe there will be some kind of zikaron as well coming up. So, have something you wanted to share. I have a few prepared words, but I don't know if anybody else wanted to. Okay.
Words cannot express the sadness I feel today, knowing I'll never see that smile or hear him say, "Hi, darling, you're finally here." Sam had a way of making everyone around him feel important and loved. I want to thank you, Alan, Mark, and Barry, for allowing me to become a part of your family. I feel so lucky and blessed to not only have known Sam, but I was able to spend almost every day with him over the last 8.5 years. Although I was brought on to care for Sam, he somehow made me feel like I was there for him to care for me. Of course, we bickered like an old married couple at times, but his feistiness and determination to get his way always made me smile. I remember when Sam had one of his carebringers bring him to the hospital after the birth of my son, just so he can make sure the baby and I were doing okay. Of course, he called me the day I came home from the hospital to see what time I was coming in, because a good movie was playing that day and he wanted to watch it with me. I told him I had literally just walked in the door from the hospital, and in Sam style, he said, "Okay, you rest up today, honey. I'll see you tomorrow." And of course, I came the next day to spend a couple hours with him. Sam was... I'm sorry, I wrote notes all over the place because it was hard to write anything at all. Sam was my mentor, my teacher, my biggest supporter, and I loved him just as much as he loved me. And he was admired and respected by all. His strength, resilience, and courage, his life stories everybody knows, proved he was a fighter. Yet he's so humble and so full of life and lived every day to the fullest. He was the candy man as everybody knew him everywhere we went. His passion and work ethics, even into his 90s, was amazing and admirable. I'm just grateful for every day I got to spend with him. And until we meet again, I'll still continue to be that impossible, stubborn person. And hopefully he'll continue to smile down at me with that smile that he always had, with his twinkles in the eyes when he said it to me. Sam, I love you. Ich lieb dir. Thank you for taking a chance on me. And I'm still going to remember the interview. And you asked me what I could do for your dad. And not only did I do it, I got him to like doing it as well. And we're going to miss him because he was a part of my life for 3 years. And I just want to say thank you for trusting me, my nephew, to take care of your dad. And we really did love him. Deepest condolences. Thank you.
Mr. Nussbaum, share some words.
There's really very little that I can add to what everybody else has said, the love that they expressed for Sam. I just want to say that there's one thing from Mishlei that sums it all up. Sam was an Ezahu Ashir Hasameach Bechelko. If there was ever a human being who demonstrated and lived that way, He was a man that was happy with whatever he had. And you heard from everyone, he smiled and he made other people smile. His pleasure to do the simple and the mundane that to him and to everybody around was really a world, like making sure the candy shelves at Kol Tuv not just were filled with candy, that they had the right candy for the right audience. He loved it. And he had his partner who would make sure when it was difficult for him to navigate on his own, that you were there. You were there right at his side and helping him, not just taking him, but being right in there helping him. But he was so proud of you and Alan. He was unbelievably proud. And it was never something that was like ostentatious or immodest or not humble enough. He was the utmost of humble. He had amazing humility, but he was so proud of each one of you. And yes, Alan, the fact that you and your family were in Eretz Yisrael, he had an amazing love for Eretz Yisrael, and you helped complete that circle. And with every simcha that you had, he lived that simcha. When you say, you weren't here, you were here because he enjoyed everything that was going on in Eretz Yisrael as if he were right there with you. And he was proud of each one of you. And Mark, I must say that I agree with what was said. Your love of coming to that apartment in these last years, of spending time with him and making sure that every convenience was there for him. The tone of the communication, the right communication units, phones that were required to make sure that he could communicate. Everything possible you did with such love and such care. So this is a family that lived this motto, that lived humility, lived love. And it all stemmed from, like you said, from the Morashah, the amazing Morashah, and it lives on. So not only is your father joining the family going back in time, but the merits, the zechut of the life that he lived and that you are all living, that goes on for the future. So it was a privilege for me and all of us who couldn't wait to see your dad. We couldn't wait. And this last few months, in terms of the pandemic and our inability to actually go in and see him, it was very hard on us also. But last but not least, I just say that his caretakers, I saw that, personally, to see that love that was shared. And it is every single one of you, as it was already, I just want to repeat it. You are God's people. Amazing. You did it with love. And we were able to share that and see it and merit by it as well. Hey, nishmosa tzur b'tzur achayim.
The thing that I can say about Sam Rosen is that he was an amazing mensch. Yes? And I was just sharing with Barry this morning, we were chatting in the car on the way here, and it wasn't about the content of any sophisticated conversation or discourse on world events or anything like that. It was just, it was who Sam was that so moved my heart as a human being. I remember when Barry and I first got married, maybe it was a year or two into our marriage, and Sam visited us when we were living in Arizona. And he and I sat together on the couch in the living room and watched Schindler's List together. I was like holding my breath the whole time, knowing that what I was seeing on the screen was so vibrant and alive to his experience, and that he had the courage and the strength to revisit that from the screen. And it just brought me so close to him. Having an affinity for those experiences of people on the planet, it really, really went deep into me. Whenever I would come and visit Sam, the first thing he would do when he was feeling better than he was the last few years, he would greet me face on face and pull me to him and give me a kiss. Wasn't shy, wasn't concerned about anything other than he wanted to have that connection and greet me. And it just made me feel so at home. The other thing that he would do, and I think it's already been mentioned, is that his smile. Soon as he would smile, that dimple, that was it, I was a goner. So I just want to thank all of you for coming here and honoring him during this time when everybody's lives are a lot more risky, and to send love and light and prayers for peace for Samuel's soul. Thank you.
I did do a funeral a couple of years ago. Somebody, a client of mine, lost his mother, and he was at the Colo at the time. And the Colo, the Chicago Community Colo, they had a band playing, and like the people were dancing. And we were planning this funeral in the next room in Rabbi Zucker's office, and it was this like bizarre, crazy thing that there's this like odd simcha over here, and this tragedy over here across the hall. And it's brought to mind, today is we're in the middle of Sukkot, Chag Simchaseinu, and how do we put that together with saying goodbye to somebody we loved? And I think Mr. Rosen, he somehow or another was able to kind of make these worlds come together in a unique way. And our family, we were just very blessed to have Mr. Rosen as really an extended member of the family for many years. Our friendships actually started on a Sukkot like this year, where, if I remember correctly, it was Shabbos. It was the first day of Sukkot, and then Mr. Rosen and his first wife, we invited them over. And when Shabbos, when you have Yom Tov after Shabbos, so you have to wait a while till the food heats up and everything. And Mr. Rosen and his wife weren't kids at that point. The sukkah was kind of cold, and their fingers were turning blue. And we're trying to get the food warmed up. And then finally we bring out the meal, and like everything was terrible. It was cold. There was like ice crystals. It was just awful. And I didn't think he'd ever talk to me again. it was after Mrs. Rosen passed away. We invited him again, and I was surprised that he accepted the invitation because we didn't deserve it. And from that week onwards, he became a regular every Friday night by us, every Shabbos day by the Dissons. Once in a while, he would tell us or the Dissons, "Oh, I'm meeting by Davis, by this one, by that one, different neighbor," and we were like a little insulted that it's like your closest relative telling you, "I'm not coming home for Pesach," But it was just a beautiful, beautiful thing for our family. We loved him as everybody did. I'm not going to say anything that everybody else didn't already say today. He was just a delight to have. He was fun. I have a stressful job, and every Friday night I almost have to be carried home from work on a stretcher. I'm so burned out. And then he was just having him at the table was like a Valium. It was just he was always relaxed. He never got frazzled over, he must have gotten frazzled over something somewhere, although I remember the night that, which really took him to Park Plaza eventually. That night he fell off the chair. He was hanging up a picture. He fell off the chair. So I was with him in the hospital, and I was all nervous, but he wasn't. Everything was calm and cool. And he would every Friday night bring over the Forward newspaper, the Yiddish paper, and read the jokes and translate them. And truth be told, I didn't always understand the jokes, but his laughter was just infectious. It just lit up the room. And we were kind of just fascinated and regaled by his stories about the old country. Like was mentioned, he really did not. He was a survivor, but he did not live in the Holocaust. When he married Miriam, who we came to love very much also, Miriam could talk a lot about the Holocaust, but he generally did not. But he talks a lot about life in Stashev, and one thing I always remember every Sukkot that astonished me. He said, and I asked him what were the sukkahs like back in Europe. So he said that the houses all had a removable roof, and you sat at your actual dining room table, and it was you were right in the middle of your house. Just there was schach over your dining room. That always kind of amazed me. That, and he kind of turned our dining room into a sukkah every week. It was just a delight to have him, and. And like it was said, he somehow lived a philosophy. I don't think he ever once told me, Shlomo, you got to do this, you got to do that. Not once direct advice, but he just permeated a philosophy about sameach v'chalko, be satisfied with what life is about. He was very proud of his sons and his daughters-in-law. I never once heard him, most parents occasionally kvetch, oh, my kid this, my kid that. He was just, I never heard anything but praise and love for his children. His life experiences, I think, he was able to take everything in life and put it in a much better perspective, for us. If the Starbucks doesn't put enough cream in your coffee, it's the end of the world. And he was able to. He had a much wider palette that he was looking at the world from, and he taught us that to prioritize what's a priority and stop worrying about Michigassen. I was just thinking that when he went back to work at the age that he went back at Kol Tu, and it was astonishing, and it said a lot about the Nablachs as well. And then when he couldn't be at work, Tracy was there manning the counter, womaning the counter, and the whole thing was like just an amazing thing that that he and to me that really just represented that his sweetness, and the candy man was exactly where he belonged. He did not belong in fresh meats or any other section. Candy was him, because he was just kol kulo ziskite. So I just, I'm very thankful that we had this bracha of Mr. Rosen in our life, and as we say goodbye to him on Sukkot, I see him going into the Anane Kavod, reuniting with his first wife, and he's certainly going to go to Gan Eden. He'll probably read some of those jokes to, I see him with the forward there in Gan Eden, and Hashem being Mekayim, the pasuk Yismach Hashem b'ma'aso, that Hashem will enjoy the jokes, or at least politely laugh when he if he doesn't get them. Tei nafsho tzoro b'tzora chayim.
Hey, those are beautiful. I don't know how to prove it myself. I love you thought of buying one of these so I could
He named my husband Ishmael.
Okay.
That's what he said. Every time we come in, he'd be like, Ishmael, I haven't seen you in forever. And I'm always like, oh.
How you doing? How are you? It's still kind of a shock.
I knew I was there that morning. The medicine for the highest dose of medicine our gastritis, something, and I said, I couldn't determine when he was going to go, and I didn't want to freak people out saying that he was classic sign. He was there yesterday.
We're gonna end with we'll say the Kaddish and then we'll do a shura. Yeah, now you come by the microphone.
One of the guys did.
Okay, where's Barrett? Barrett?
Oh, wait.
Yisgadal, Yisgadal, Shmei Rabah, V'yamad Dehu Osi L'Yishato, Olachaya Matzia, Olashach Lolo, Hecholet, Nifrak, Chaya, Olivne, Karta, Yerushalayim, Olme'akar, Pulchano, Nuchiro, Me'are, V'la'asova, Pulchono, Kadisha, Dishmayo, La'asre, V'zive, V'kore, Ushkante, V'yatzmach, Porkane, V'yakre, Mishike, V'chaye Echon, V'yom Echon, V'chaye Beit Yisrael, V'olah, V'zman, Kariv, V'ru Amen, Yehei Shmei Rabba, V'rach, V'olam, V'mei
V'yisbarach, v'yishtabach, v'yispa'ar, v'yisramam, v'yisnaseh. V'yisadar, v'yisaleh, v'yisalol, shmei, d'kodashah, b'richu. Le'olam min kol birchasa, v'shirasa, tushkachasa, v'nechamasa. Tamiron, v'alma, v'imru amen. Yehei Shlomo Rabba min Shemaya, V'chaim Tovim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom V'merav, Huyas HaShalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen.
Okay, and if everybody could maybe line up in 2 rows, we'll end with Shura.